All right, welcome again to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. What are we talking about today, Samuel?
Well, we are following up our finishing of the entire series. So I've got the cheat book if we want to bring it out in discussion. And we got comments from last time, and you had thoughts that you wanted to pile on top of the just getting through the material last time.
Yeah, a few. And then Isomorphic kind of sent me down a rabbit hole on something and then gave me an idea for something I was already thinking of. But next time, I want to stick with this and do a deeper dive on souls, and what exactly they are in the Wheel of Time world, and then that may send us on a tangent of real world philosophical meanderings of two old men talking about consciousness.
I was
Um,
going to say, soul, what is that? Well, it's ancient man's explanation for our consciousness, is what it is.
Ergo, that will probably need to be its own episode. Plus, for the Wheel of Time part of it, I want to do some more digging into Jordan's uh, answers on the question, because this was something that came up a lot during the Wheel of Time writings and readings. And so it was asked a lot because, well, I mean, right off the bat, they talk about souls. And then pretty early on, we get a hint. We're not told exactly what it is, but we're given a strong hint of what it means to be the Lord of the Grave. Um, because is it the prologue to the Dragon Reborn where we first see Osongar and Arangar? It's pretty early on. It's
Mm,
either Dragon Reborn or Shadow Rising. It's in a prologue early on, and then we
yeah,
don't see them
it
again
can't be. I don't
until
think it's
later.
Dragon Reborn because I don't remember. So it might
Well,
be
I've got
Shadow
Dragon
Rising.
Report right
Yeah.
here. Yes, Dragon Reborn's prologue is Fain slash Mordeth as the advisor for Pedron Nial,
Hmm.
and it's serves as kind of the extra epilogue for the Great Hunt.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Isn't the Boars meeting? Isn't that Dragon
that's the
Reborn
Great
too?
Hunt.
That's the Great
No,
Hunt. Okay.
that's the Great Hunt.
Mm.
Anyway, so the idea of what is a soul and what does that mean? Because also one of the reasons this came up a lot is because the theories before we knew more about what the Lews Therin voice was, one of the theories is that they're not just two separate people, but two separate souls. And so that was asked a lot of, could two souls inhabit one body?
Mm.
Was something that was said. And because
Well, I'm gonna take that. I think I have a semi explanation for that because of all the stuff we talked about with the World of Dreams, especially as we were getting near the end,
mhm,
because there's a what we get from the entire book series is there is a physicalness to the soul, and it can actually exist differently in different places. That's why it's so bad to go to the world of dreams in your flesh. And Birgitte always looks the same in the world of dreams, but had she been born, she could have had red hair, she could have had brown hair, she could have had this. So being there is the physical part that is you, but it manifests differently as it comes out. And we have an overlap. I think the being born again part and the voice in the head was this bridging between worlds that was necessary for Rand to do what he needed to do, and it is actually probably there because of the weakening in the pattern.
mhm.
But
Yeah, and the World of Dreams stuff is what I wanted to talk about more today, and what that means for the ending. Um, and I wanted to rant and grumble a little bit more about Rand's transference um into Elon's body, and how that worked. And I think that's going to also tie into this idea of what is a soul and how does this work.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but for today, I wanted to think and talk more on the world of dreams and the mirror worlds and what that means for what was happening at the ending and how things worked at the end there. Um, and then maybe at some other point, I wanted to just stick with uh interviews of Sanderson and Jordan and the books and see if we can't think our way through this before I started going down forum rabbit holes of what other people think and if any of these questions have actually been definitively answered or not. Um, so like I said last time, I think we have several episodes of Wheel of Time left from questions that keep popping up, like um the rabbit hole I went down. Where is it? All right. Isomorphic said something. Um, well, first he made fun of the way I talk. Uh, it's not until he said it out loud that I realized it's more death. Yeah, that's probably not how it's supposed to be pronounced, but I have a Texahoman accent, so it's weird. Um, back to the comments. You are welcome. Thank you guys. I listened to the social episode as well. Sam's and Heath's advice is greatly appreciated. I'll just start and we'll be glad to share with you. Awesome. We look forward to it. Oh, here it was. This is what sent me down the rabbit hole. Uh, Sanderson admitted several times that he didn't know what to do with more death, and he dropped the ball on that storyline. And let me tell you, he definitely did. Also, that immune system twist didn't work for me at all. I have to think I had to think we weren't the only ones. You and I weren't the only ones that went ugh with that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I hadn't looked because by the time these three books came out, I wasn't on the forums as much as I had been, simply as a time thing.
You know what it's kind of like? It's kind of like me writing my final paper last night, where I'm covering a topic and there's like three things from the lecture that are really just dumb, but I have to fit them into the paper somehow. So I
Mhm.
kind of just put them in. Yeah, that's what he did with Padan Fain. I've got to tie this knot, but what do I do?
Well,
'Cause-
it's worse than that. As I went down this rabbit hole of things that I hadn't seen, but also jogging my memory of, oh yeah, I remember reading that Jordan said this about more death. And a lot of the questions we had when we were going through that section, where this random name comes out of nowhere, and now all of a sudden this creature has a new name,
Mhm.
and it's, wait, what is this? But the way he writes it, a lot of those things we were postulating about what is this? Is this some kind of, you know, ancient evil? Is this kind of a Cthulian homage, or something like that? Of is this, um, gosh, I can't even remember the stupid random name because it just comes out of nowhere. It's like
Shoshwami or Siasimos, yeah.
Siasimo, Miasima, whatever. Um, is this kind of a great old one kind of thing of something that just kind of lurks in the darkness out there, and then this man Mordeth plus um the evil, the corruption of Arid Hole, did that draw this creature to it? Well, no. If you look at what Jordan said about it, it's not just that he didn't know what to do with it, and I don't know how this got past Maria and Harriet, or if we're just not, if there's a nuance here that just has yet to be explained. But on the surface, it contradicts what Jordan said pretty definitively about where Mashadar came from, which
Hmm.
was a creation of, to the point you made way back when we were talking about how the taint was cleansed, is you have this new pole, if you will. There's this kind of third pole because it was the dark one and the light. Well, now you have this third entity, which is a human made corruption that also opposes the dark
Hmm.
one rather than a human corruption that joins the Dark One.
which is actually where I thought of actually a good ending because Padan Fain Mordeth slash Mordeth storyline was too big to leave as one of the open ends, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you could have had it to where in the epilogue, the knife ends up somewhere with Padan Fain, and there is an infection that's being born around him because we saw that with Matt. We saw that it can happen that way,
Mm-hmm.
but we had another big character that was almost too big to not close up, and he closed up like that with just being dead, and that was Shidar Heron. Haddon Fane was going to fight the Dark One because he wanted to be the ruler of all of this stuff, Mordeth, whatever his new name was. It is, I was looking it up, Shai Sam. But a showdown with Mordeth and Shidar Heron would have been a good ending that was completely unexpected because you expect the good guys to kill Padan Fane. But remember, Padan Fane lived his later life tormenting Murdral. And
Yeah.
Shidar Heron is the hand of the dark. You could have had something with the mist catching all these Trollocs and deforming them and everything. And Shidar Heron having a showdown with Padan Fane, where Padan Fane stabs him with the dagger. And it's kind of like, oh, that's cute. I am a true thing of the dark. You are a thing of men.
Mm.
And killing Padan Fane and then being done with him, not more death, Morden being done with him and doing what he needs to do. Where Shidar Heron could have been the one to kill Padan Fane, and it could have been that moment of, ha, you think your evil's that bad? You're a thing of men.
Mm-hmm.
I am a thing of the true dark. It would have closed the loop on the dagger. It would have closed the loop on Padan Fane. It would have been a cool moment for a really cool bad guy that just ends up dead on the floor when Rand gets there. He's
Mm-hmm.
DOA, and yeah, it would have made more sense than what we got. And no stupid one liner. It would have been a good one liner instead of a stupid one liner about infections and disease,
Mm-hmm.
which is still problematic.
So I went to incidentally the what.fandom.com wiki. Um, if you go to the Robert Jordan page, which I've showed before, they have a great database chronologically of all of the interviews and Q&As from Jordan. So if you want to see what he said directly, and then they have a link to theoryland.com, but it's a dead link. But if you go to Theoryland itself, uh, on the front page, you can click on the searchable database of Q&As with Jordan and Sanderson. And so I went there and I just clicked on the More Death tag to just pull up everything that is tagged with More Death. And here's one of the first things that says, wait, this seems like an complete contradiction of what you were writing there at the end, with what this thing is. Um, so this is from 1996, uh, at a Crown of Swords signing, um, which just makes me feel old because, yeah, the series is that old. Crap. Are we old, Sam? Um,
Uh,
anyway,
yeah,
yeah,
I would say
okay.
old enough to be wise, but we've proven that wrong many times.
He was asked directly, what is Fain? And this was Robert Jordan's response: more death plus person. More death is a human made evil, right off the bat. So I don't know where this leaves room for what Sanderson wrote there and
Or
what
the
is going on.
infection that got to humans instead of the
Yes.
other way around. Yeah.
And um Jordan actually said a couple of times, this is another reason, because this is in here as well. I hadn't really thought of this, but we were griping about the whole immune system twist, is that it's not an infection, it's a corruption. So that
Mm-hmm.
an infection is a problematic way to think about it because it's not, and I believe he uses the word communicable. In other words, this is something, it's more parasitical.
Mm-hmm.
So you can contract a parasite, and it's really hard for a parasite to jump from human to human, um, because that's just not the way they work. But if you're around the source of the parasite, you will catch them, and so it will the corruption that created Mordeth, um, that will corrupt you eventually if you're around it long enough. But Matt couldn't infect someone else. That what they did, what Moraine does in the Eye of the World, she says, is she's blocking the dagger,
Mm-hmm.
because that's the point. That's the corruption. It's not Matt. So the whole immune system twist fails there, because that's not even how it works. And Jordan said specifically that's not a good way to think about it. Anyway, this was, I had forgotten this was the phrase he used, which again, the way the way he wrote about Shiazma, whatever, Shiza, the way he wrote about Shiza, uh, got me to wondering, you know, huh, does this mean the corruption of the ways wasn't just the taint, that Machin Shin was something akin to what this creature is as well? No, I don't think so. Because the rest of this answer, the Black Wind gets along with Mordeth because of professional courtesy, is the phrase he used. Professional courtesy. Um, and then he, because people were wondering, when did this? Yeah, this was even before, and this came up again after Winter's Heart, with the weird thing that Fain does, the illusion he creates, that trap for Rand. He was asked, and Jordan said definitely he cannot channel. Quote, he has a lot of skills and abilities outside of channeling. Quote, Fain is anti-Forsaken as well as anti-Rand.
Mm-hmm.
So
Which he
again,
did make
other
clear in that
pull.
last little bit on him that he was there to kill both of them. And again, that's why that would have been a perfect moment to have an anti-hero moment with the bad guy.
Mm-hmm. Um, and this was the other thing that jumped out and made me go, well, wait a minute, because the way he writes about Shiza is that, again, this had us wondering if this was some sort of Lovecraftian homage. Well, here again, I don't think so, because this comes from a Dragonmount Q&A from 2002. Question: has the Padan Fain slash Mordeth character been present in previous ages, or is he unique to this particular age? Jordan: he is unique to this particular age, a very unique fellow indeed. In some ways, you might say he has unwittingly sidestepped the pattern. Well, that's weird and leads to lots of what the F does that mean? But it's also pretty clear that um, this is some sort of creation, not just of a third age, but this third age.
Mm-hmm.
The sidestep the pattern thing is really interesting to me, and it makes me wonder, just thinking out loud here, if, because the other thing I wanted to talk about is, I'm going back to the Dragon Reborn when Varen gives the explanation of the world of dreams to Egwene.
Mm-hmm.
Is
Well,
that
and
part
I've
of?
got the book Celine references when she's
Oh,
talking to
okay,
Rin
yes,
right here. Uh,
but
and also toward Norin Strander's consciousness and
oh,
multiple
yikes.
possibilities and how they work. So,
Well, it just occurred to me that maybe these, as Jordan mentioned in the previous Q&A, these unique skills and abilities that Fain slash Mordeth has, are they similar to what we see at the very end of there with Rand, that Is that why Rand seemingly is able to manifest like in the world of dreams in the real world, because he has somehow sidestepped the pattern? And Jordan was always very particular and careful with his words. And so it makes me wonder, was that a clue to the end? Is that why he
Mm.
phrased it that way? Is Fain slash Mordeth, when they became what they did, do they now somehow exist aside from the pattern, and thus they somehow exist in this world of dreams, mirror world, connected space while still being in the real world?
Well, as we were discussing with the voice in the head, you kind of talked about, is it two souls in the same body?
Mm-hmm.
And if more death, what he became was a thing of men, it started with him. So is it the soul of Mordeth inside of the soul, sharing space with the soul of Padan Fain?
Mm-hmm.
And if that's the case, what you're getting at is that Rand did something similar to flip the bodies.
No, I wasn't even talking about the bodies. I was talking about his lighting of the pipe.
Oh, yeah. I almost wonder if that's one of those things you're just supposed to go, heh, because it's we talk about how the Dragon Reborn is the avatar of the creator, but the creator refuses to take a direct uh
Mm-hmm.
a kind of a direct action into the world, but he also created the world. So creating the fire just by thinking about it is a similar type
Hmm.
thing to that. So there has to be some connection to the dark one to the world, or there would be no evil, right? There has to be some connection to from the creator to the world, or there would be no creation. But there's probably a healthy, balanced connection, which is where the seal comes in. The dark one physically is sealed behind this thing, but his existence manifests in the world. Whereas the creator physically keeps himself out of the world, but if his light, if his presence wasn't there, then there would be nothing. So it's just Rand is still the avatar of the creator, and his Apple's moment was where he actually harnessed this thing that was him.
Yeah. Um.
Now the whole he lost the power stuff. I mean, you could just say Morden was burned out by the action, but because he wasn't Morden at the time, he doesn't feel that loss. Uh, Maybe that's the case. I don't know.
Um.
Now, sidestep the pattern. I wonder if that has to do with what he learned while he was in the void, in the nothingness with Morden, or not Morden, with the Dark One, because he could see the pattern physically. If that's what gave him the insight to do what he
Hmm.
did, because he could see people dying, he could see this, he could probably see rebirth because someone in the world was getting born, you know. So it's he maybe because he could see that he had the insight of how he could basically do what the as I brought up last time, do what the Dark One did to a newly dead body when he put Osingar and Erengar in there. The only hole to that theory would be the fact that they weren't completely dead.
Okay. Last thing on Fain slash Mordeth slash Shiza. Um.
Okay.
Because uh, this is from an interview with Sanderson, and his statements here make me go, wait, then why did you write what you wrote? Okay, so this is an interview from
Can you pop it
2009.
up on the screen so I can read it while
Yeah,
you're
good idea, because this one's a little lengthier. So give me a second to get it up. He so we've got two interviews here. Or two sections from the same interview. And this is from 2009. Um, and so this would have been Gathering Storm, I believe, was 2009. Was it not? Um,
Yeah, that sounds about right.
yeah. Because I think when we were finishing up, we looked and it was 2012 or 13 when the last one came out. Anyway, um, so interview from 2009 with Sanderson. The question, you mentioned that Mordeth was a man that had power. Your report is saying that his power was that, quote, which he got by seeking out all of the evil things that weren't related to the shadow. Sanderson, he was seeking things that were related to the shadow. I think that that might be a misquote. He was looking into the power of the shadow in order to defeat it, was his goal.
The whole fight fire with fire thing.
Yeah. He was looking into everything. He was looking into things that were not necessarily related to the Dark One as well. He was looking for everything that he could get. Previous to him arriving to Arid Hole, yeah. Before he went to the king and became the counselor, Mortis with this guy went around searching for power. Yeah, he wanted to defeat the Dark One, and he felt that he could find other ways to do it. He originally was good. He wasn't this terrible person to begin with, but he was looking to defeat the Dark One to find a way to defeat the Shadow, and he looked into a lot of things he shouldn't have looked into. There are evils that are not necessarily directly related to the Dark One, though everything evil kind of has, just as there are goods that are not necessarily related to the one power. We are talking about talking much as Perrin runs with wolves. This is a thing older than there are other evil things that are old in similar ways. And the next part here kind of follows along to that reference he made to Perrin. Question, okay, is more this power, this evil power, comparable to the one power in true power? Is it a power that can be woven? Answer, no. It's more something along the lines of Perrin's wolf power, something more natural. You couldn't weave Mordeth. Okay, so it's more of a natural. It's more of a natural, though it's unnatural. It's an unnatural, natural thing. Because Jordan was really particular about, he tried to have a logic-based system as it pertained to the one power. Is this power more supernatural in the sense that it is based on physics? Answer, let's say more instinctual. So again, this doesn't line up with the appearance of Shiza. Now, I think when I first read it, I don't remember if I said this last time or not, but this whole kind of Cthulian homage idea, I think was new to this reread. I think when I first read it, I was assuming that the reason it had a new name, it wasn't that, on this reread, it seemed like, actually, no, this isn't a new name. This is its old name, its original name.
Mm-hmm.
I think my assumption the first time I read it was this is finally Fain and Mordeth merging to create something new.
Mm-hmm.
Because there was always this kind of duality of Fain and Mordeth, of Fain, the Dark One's hound, which is something that Jordan brought up a number of times when he was asked about Fain slash Mordeth, is to remind people, to your point about souls, that, not to sidetrack us there, but Fain's was seemingly already corrupted.
Mm-hmm.
One, because he had pledged himself to the Dark
Well,
One, but then
and
also whatever it was that the Dark One did to create, to make him the Dark One's hound, which was capitalized, was like a proper title.
yeah, and all the way
Something
up until
he wrote
the
about.
end, I had, even in this reread, I had read the reason why Fane still lives is because of what the Dark One did to him.
Mm,
Because otherwise he would have been consumed a long time ago.
yes. And so I think when I first read it, because of that, I was assuming that this is the Fain personality and the Mordeth personality merging to create a new entity,
Into
a new
something more
personality. Yeah.
powerful because it is a blending of what happened in Arid Hole and
Yes,
the
yes.
Dark One, whatever the Dark One did to Paden Fane.
Hmm.
Yep. Or Paden
And,
Fane or whatever.
and if you go through these Q and A's, that seems a much more logical conclusion, not the way it was written and the way we were thinking about it this time of wait, what is this thing? All right. Oh, interesting footnote maybe. I don't know if it's a side note. I don't know exactly how it's related here, but I had not heard this before until I started looking into Mordeth slash Fain. And Sanderson was asked, and I don't know, I'd be curious to know why people even thought to ask the question, but I find this interesting. Question: did Mordeth go to the Finns? Sanderson, yes. That was one of the things Mordeth did before he went to Arid Hole,
Hmm.
when he was looking for ways to defeat the Dark One. So,
So if we go with the way Sanderson ended it, we talk about the things like the Finns were the second ones, right? The ones that Matt went to and got the Ashendara and all of that, right? Not the answers, but the other ones.
mm,
The evil that is Shaisa, it was the gift from
hmm,
the Finns. You could go down that route, but you have to make that at least uh, kind of extractable from the literature. We needed a thought in his head that said this gift is an ancient thing, and a memory from Mordeth of going to this place and
mm.
talking to these foxy people. So yeah, you can't just have it out there. And the interview is where you have to get the answer if you're gonna go to something that big. It could be a little clue, but it's got to at least be a clue.
Um,
Are we still going up the comments, or are you still on Mordeth?
oh, let me get back to that. Yeah. So, uh, if anyone has any more thoughts on Mordeth there and what all that means, uh, then let us know, and we could keep going down that rabbit hole because I do find it interesting, especially looking at the Q&As and seeing, you know, how they reinforce what we were already thinking. And so is this a contradiction? Is this a, as you said, isomorphic? Sanderson admitted that he didn't know what to do with Mordeth and he dropped the ball. Well, this is more than a dropping of the ball. This is a complete fumble Ruski turnover pick six.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because it's completely contradictory, seemingly. Or is there a way to square this circle that I don't see? Um, let me do this one first before we get to the longer comment here, because the longer comment will lead us back to where I wanted to go, which is the world of dreams.
Mm-hmm.
Because he said something here that made me go, huh, I'd never thought about that before. Okay, so the Dark One is a parallel for a black hole. My guess is that previous ages attempts to drill into a different dimension, I assume. For the true power is a parallel to LHC and the search for a unified theory of everything or the underlying unifying force, right? Rand fulfilled a physicist's power fantasy of defeating the ultimate boogeyman of cosmology, the black hole. Um, but not just a physicist power fantasy, but then um, you see this. I find that interesting, and what it made me think of was one of the few horror movies I found legitimately scary. Event Horizon. It's not scary
Mm.
when you go back and you rewatch it because there is some cheese there that I guess was supposed to be comic relief, but in rewatching it, it's, well, that's kind of cringy. But I mean, the idea there was you create a miniature black hole to create a faster than light drive through dimensional travel rather than direct speed in our world, except the black hole took them to hell. So literally, they traveled through hell,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what happened to them. And then all sorts of horrors happen. And um, I guess
Yeah, I
that
didn't mind
actually,
that movie that much, but I guess I took it with a grain of salt when I watched it. So
Well, see, I took it to be, and there is enough ambiguity in it that it could be something like hell. I took it to be literally hell, is where the ship went, and that's what was haunting the ship. And I actually hadn't thought about this when that popped into my head with your comment, but there's another interesting parallel tie to Fain, because what was happening with the ship is the ship was much like Arid Hole, is that it had become, the ship itself had become infected with
Hmm.
this evil, and that's why it was kind of semi-conscious and tormenting people. Um, I don't know if it's that literal though. To back to the comment, I suspect that he was using the concept of the black hole as an illustration in much the same way that he was using the concept of the weave,
Hmm.
which isn't new. You know, you go to Norse, go to Greek mythology, and I'm sure there are others, but those are the two I know of to explain the universe as a tapestry. You know,
Hmm.
as threads being lives are threads being woven into this complicated age lace, is the phrase Varen's going to use here when we get to that point.
Well, and also think of the players involved, which would be like Elon, Ishii, and Lanfear being two of the major players in the opening of the bore.
Mm.
And the think of the understanding as we're going to get to when we talk about the portal stones and the mirror worlds. These are things that they had a semi understanding of. They had a pretty damn good understanding of the world of dreams. And they had a sense that there was something beyond those things that had extreme power. And Elon probably was very well studied in something that we don't have in this third age, which was what happened in previous ages.
Mm.
And we talk about the three ages being the wheel. There was probably an opening of the bore 3 ages ago from where.
6 or 7, actually. I
Yeah.
think Jordan had said at one point, specified at one point, that
Mhm.
it's either 6 or 7 ages in one turning.
Yeah, and though they had totally different motivations for it, him and Lanfear came together to try to access this power that existed. She wanted the power. He was the nihilist that thought this would be the thing that ends the rotating of the wheel and the spinning back out of, because he understood the fact that we were multiple lives coming out over and over
Mm-hmm.
and over again. And he got very nihilistic because of it, where she just wanted the power, and those two forces combined figured out a way to break through whatever
Well,
the
he
construct
wasn't with
was.
her. It was someone else. It was another male Aes Sedai. He wasn't the one who helped drill the bore.
Yeah, but he set the seeds.
There's something I'd be more interested to know, like in a side story, short story. I want to know more about Myron and Alon in the Age of Legends. What was their relationship before they became Forsaken? To me, that would be a very interesting short story. All right, on to the main course here. Um, Maybe the twist with Rand's power is that it was all a dream. Just kidding. Well, you're only half just kidding,
Yeah.
because then he goes on here, and this makes me go, huh? Maybe he is fulfilling the Aiel proverb prophecy that life is a dream. He is dead now, and his dreams are in the real world along with the dream power. Heath made an important observation that Rand is, for some reason, relieved that he can't channel. In lieu of how the soul is connected to the power in the pattern, does that mean that he is now outside the pattern? Like, as Jordan said about Fain slash Mordeath, is that he had sidestepped the pattern, and that made me go, ugh. And so that's where this comment had got my brain working. Um, Presumably, him still having his soul, the Dragon Reborn soul, would mean he would still have the power. Because as an aside, for anyone who doesn't know, Jordan was asked this specifically on multiple occasions, and he confirmed that yes, the ability to channel is connected to the soul. So if you are someone who can channel, then every time your soul is reborn, that person has the ability to channel, whatever that means in the age in which you live. And presumably it may mean nothing because there would have to be at least some age or ages where the power is unknown. And that's a lot of people's thought on what the first age is. And that's what creates the second age, the age of legends, is when the one power is discovered and the ability to weave it is learned slash discovered. And that creates the age of legends. Um, anyway, so that was the other big wait, what? First of all, I didn't even think this when we were talking last time, because to me it was just confusing from Rand's point of view is why is he relieved that he can't channel? And it didn't dawn on me until we were done. And Isomorphic brings up the point here is, well, wait a minute, why can't he channel? Because the way it's written, it doesn't seem like he was burnt out. It's just there's nothing there. There's no
Mm-hmm.
there. It's not like being burnt out or being, you know, gentled, stilled, or even being in a steading, because we have a lot of points of view from people who that had happened to, and we know what that feels like. And Rand doesn't give any indication that that is the case.
Well,
It's
no,
simply there's nothing.
I had to flip to Morden because if you really think about it, you never see Morden use anything but the true power.
Huh. That's weird. Yeah, and somebody
According to the cheat book, he had a power of ++1, which was the same as Rand's in the
I, I,
power.
I don't remember exactly where it is. I think it's Demandred's point of view when he's talking, when he goes to meet Mordred for some reason, and he's holding a rat, and the rat tries to bite him. You remember the scene I'm talking about? I don't remember
Mm-hmm.
which book it's in. And he flings it away. He sets it on fire and flings it away. And I think it is Demandred who comments in his head that it was the true power and that was a seemingly small thing to use the true power for. And then he has just this flood of saw across his eyes, and Demander thinks he must be using the true power exclusively now to have that much saw in his eyes. And to your point, I hadn't thought about it, but it may be that, yeah, could he, or did he just not? Because I do think that every thinking about it, it feels like every time we see him use the power, it's the true power.
Yeah, if we're looking at the text, that would be a plausible explanation. If we're looking at the little cheat book that they put out, they give him a power rating in the one power. So, uh, but again, this book was written well after Jordan was passed. So
Mhm.
whether this is a relic of something that was not intended, because maybe Jordan intended Moradin to never have been able to use Satan.
Well,
So
I recall reading that the power ratings were based off of something in the notes, that they might not have been explained or written quite that way, but there was a power rating of some sort that he used
yeah, but
to
whoever
keep
did
track of
this
who's.
book might have taken Ishi's power rating and just transferred it to Morden too.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
So we are left unanswered, but it is a plausible theory
yeah.
or
So back to
hypothesis, I should
Isomorphic's
say.
comment, which, let's get in deep, giggity. Um, Or does that mean that, in accordance with Eastern philosophy wisdom of how we live the same life again and again until we get it right, hence Rand's epiphany in The Gathering Storm, he finally got it right? So the pattern does not need the Dragon Reborn soul anymore? At least the pattern does not need a soul to have the Dragon Reborn power and destiny. That would all right. So back to the comment here, and this really made me go, huh, and connects back to the idea of, wait, is the whole Aiel idea of waking from the dream, and Rand is going to wake, and then they're all going to wake. The Aiel talk that way a lot, and I hadn't really had this thought before until Isomorphic brought it up, and then he connects it to the Eastern philosophy, which there's a lot of in the Wheel of Time. There's obviously a lot of influence there. Um, this might be going too far because I don't know that Jordan intended this. And I think you get a hint of that from Rand's points of view at the end there, that he understands that because his whole idea for killing the Dark One, that was kind of his own version of being Alon the philosopher.
Mm-hmm.
Is I want to end this, except he wanted to end it with utopia. Alon wanted to end it with nothingness.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so
It's not Eastern philosophy, but it's the Nietzsche interpretation from the Nazis versus the communists.
yeah, and I think we made that point way back when we were first talking about Alon the philosopher.
Mm-hmm.
Is I think one of us said he's you know he's like a college sophomore who read the first part of Nietzsche and didn't keep reading or didn't get it, and so he just becomes super goth. Um,
Well, no, this is Jordan actually understanding Nietzsche,
mm,
because it was so those were the two views. It was the nihilism that inspired a lot of the Nazi movement versus the communists, which were inspired by a utopian vision. And this is Jordan saying neither is good.
yeah, yeah. That if you read and understand Nietzsche in his totality, is you get to the point where Rand got to, which is, you know, if you're going to be glass half empty like me, is yeah, life sucks, but it's all we've got, so we might as well keep on going. So to that point, I think you may be reaching a little too far here with the last part here. So, or does that mean that in accordance with Eastern philosophy wisdom of how we live the same life again and again until we get it right, hence Rand's epiphany in the Gathering Storm, he finally got it right? So the pattern does not need the Dragon Reborn soul anymore. At least the pattern does not need a soul to have the Dragon Reborn power and destiny. That would also bring the finality to the whole series. Um, let me stop there. Is that's what I mean by I think you're reaching too far. I don't think Jordan intended this to be an end. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
the very end is it isn't the end; it's an ending.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's him reiterating the wheel keeps turning. This is just the telling of one age of one turning. Um, but I do find that idea interesting, that that's why he doesn't have a soul, or that's why he can't
Channel.
channel, is that the pattern doesn't need the Dragon Reborn anymore. In much the same way that we get I don't remember if it's Perrin or Matt's point of view at the very end there, where he can kind of feel that he's not Tavarin anymore,
Mm-hmm.
which makes sense because that's how it's explained, is that for a time the pattern revolves around this individual because the creator is trying to push things in a certain direction. You know? So I do find that interesting. But this last part is, I don't think I said it, but this was my interpretation of why maybe Rand was relieved that he couldn't channel. The next stage will have new challenges and other heroes. That's why Rand is relieved he can't channel. That is my final pitch. Yeah, that was my best guess, but I still found it odd. Like I said, I didn't even think about the fact that, wait, why can't he channel? Um, but my best guess is, the whole shtick there at the end is he's tired, man. He just
Well,
wants to go see the world without having anything pulling or pushing on him. He just wants to
that's
be
why I
free.
brought the creator into the conversation, because that power he had through just creation was something he had all along because he's the
Hmm.
dragon. The one power was a necessity for the task,
Hmm.
but it was something he had all along. That was one of his epiphanies on Dragonmount. It was Dragonmount, the death of Lews Therin, that pulled him to the edge that he needed to actually tap into what his existence meant all along. And he comes back from that saying, I exist. I exist. His existence is the avatar of the creator. Now, this might be the you did the right thing, kid. Go ahead and live your life normally. But he can't get rid of the part of him that is still the avatar
Hmm.
of the creator. So it's not something that's just going to go away because that his soul is connected to that. His
There,
soul is
that
the connection to the
yeah,
creator. The one power, let's maybe go to an age where the one power wasn't tapped into.
that's what I was just
The
what I was about
dragon,
to
yeah,
say.
the
Yeah.
dragon reborn may not have needed the one power there. He may have needed, Elon Musk type technical prowess, right? Instead of that one ability. So the one power was a necessary tool needed right
Hmm.
now, right here in this age where dreadlords are going to come and stop you. Whereas the connection to the creator was there all along, and it can't go away because that is your soul. Your soul is
Hmm.
that connecting beacon.
That's a good point. And that's where I was going to go is my thought was, well, the Dragon Reborn is almost certainly reborn in ages where the one power is not known,
Mhm.
and the Dragon Reborn will need something to do what he's supposed to do in that age, to achieve whatever it is that he's supposed to achieve in that age. And to your point, that isn't the one power. The one power is just a tool for the second and third age.
And in fact, we
And
we we get the second age, which is the age of legends, and we get the end result of that, which is this people that are very technologically advanced, but they're also able to tap into the one power. And if we look at the access to the one power, it is a very Eastern meditative enlightenment process. It's different for males and females, but it is an awareness of consciousness. And if you can achieve that level by doing these meditative practices, the flame in the void with the males and the opening of the flower with the females, those are meditative practices.
that's a good point, is they both have an element of the oneness as the first step. Now
And
the
so we
next
look at
step they
the end
take to
result of
actually
the Age
grab the
of
power is
Legends.
different. But
All
yeah.
that technology might have happened because they didn't have that power till the end.
Mm.
So we have this technological rise and then this enlightenment period that results in the Age of Legends, which almost seems utopian like. They had soldiers, so there had to be some violence somewhere, somehow. But at the same time, these soldiers in the descriptions they gave us are sitting there bored. So we enter a place where everything is first world problems. And so something as humans do, we come and fuck it up by drilling a bore to ultimate evil, looking for power, right? So that's exactly the state of man. That's what's happening right now in a lot of places, especially in the
Oh,
United States, the Roman Empire, all of these things.
oh
It gets
geez,
so good
let's
we
get
fuck it up.
canceled.
Yeah.
Let's get canceled, because you just made me realize, why did they drill the bore? Well, the justification was we will no longer need to be male and female, because it's just one power that both can tap into.
Wow. I like that.
We no longer need the binary sexual distinction. It will no longer be necessary. Except, as we see, no, that's the whole reason your symbol is the yin yang symbol. There must be
Mm-hmm.
push and pull. And when you try to eliminate that and just make a solid colored circle, what is it? It's a just utter black nothingness.
And to go with current academia, the men are saying, "Hey, this is wrong," and the women are saying, "It's just fair." That's why they didn't go to stop it in the end, and Louis Theron had to do it by himself, which was not a good idea. But who else was going to do it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Um. All right. Well, I think there's still plenty more to be thought and said there on those ideas from that comment, but a lot of that is going to be, you know, what the heck is a soul, and how does that impact what's going on at the end here? Um, Save
Well,
that for later. For now,
yeah.
let's get into the world of dreams part of it.
Or were you
Um,
looking at the mirror worlds? World of Dreams and
Both,
mirror worlds. Both. Okay.
because Varen, when I was looking for this section, I couldn't remember if it was in the Great Hunt or the Dragon Reborn, And I thought maybe she said something about it in the Great Hunt before they used the portal stone outside this Steading Sofu.
Hmm.
And so I went and I looked back at that, and um I noticed something, just a minor little thing, and this is why I love the series, a minor little thing on my reread of this reread. Uh remember Varen asks Rand, "Are you a gambler?" And Rand says, "No, Matt's the gambler." Why? Because she knows some stuff, but she doesn't know enough. So you're going to have to pick the symbol and hope you get it right. And Rand says Matt's the gambler. Well, Varen's response is, "Yeah, well, let's leave him out of this for now." How does that work out? Then what happens in the next book, or two books later? Rand doesn't leave him out. That's why Rand needs his friends,
Hmm.
because how do they make it to Redeem? Matt flips a coin. Now it's double checked by Rand because he blindly points at a symbol,
Hmm.
and they're both right. They both pick the same one, and that's how Rand is confident this is the symbol. So I had never noticed that before, and that cannot be an accident. That they use the portal stone, it goes horribly wrong, and why?
Not horribly wrong when we think of
No,
fate, because
it yeah, it
Ingtar
could have
made
gone
his change
worse.
of heart by
That's
visions he
that's a good
saw in the
point.
portal stone, and that was important for the end product.
It was also necessary, as much as Rand feels like, oh crap, I've screwed up, because he wasted several months instead of gaining time, they lost time.
Hmm.
But that was also necessary for all the pieces to be in place.
Yeah, because
You know,
Padan Fain needed to be gone already again. Bail Doman needed to be there to Bail Doman it.
mm-hmm.
And, all of these things had to happen for it to work
Yeah,
out the way it
and
did. Yeah.
he needed to arrive at the right moment to rescue, or quasi rescue Egwene
And he
and
needed
all
the
this other
insight
stuff.
of who Ishi was.
Mm.
That because remember, up until the Portal Stones, he still thought Ishi was the Dark One himself, which I think he still kind of did at that point, but he
He
knew
still kind of
he kind
does.
of gets insight into what the dealio is, that there's something bigger than it
Yeah,
all.
there's something else going on here.
Mhm.
And then that is confirmed at the end of this book, because when he finally kills Balsamon, there's a body. And as Moraine says, "You think the Dark One has a body?" And he doesn't want to admit that she's right, but it's confirmation of kind of what was already going on here. Anyway,
Yeah,
I just found
so
that interesting, that little, just this tiny little Easter egg here, and it's, how did I not really realize this before? But there it is,
yeah, and so
and
again, a
that's why
Varen
this
quote
series is so
about the
awesome.
Portal Stones: "The lines that join the worlds that might be, laid by those who knew the numbers of chaos." And then we go to Celine's referencing of the Mirrors of the Wheel, which is the book she references in The Great Hunt. "It is a book written before the breaking about the alternative worlds beyond portal stones. According to Celine, some of these worlds were like mirrors, especially those without people. Some reflected only great events that occurred in their own world, whereas some had a shadow of the reflection even though the event occurred." So why I got this other book out, on consciousness, is there's a section on probabilities, and I wonder if the strength of the reflection is the extent of it being probable based on what happens in the actual real world. So we
No,
talked about it
yes,
being multiple universes, like a multiverse, but instead of that being just the slight hint of the things that could happen, and the less probable it is, the further down the tree of probabilities, the less strong the vision is. Because the example here is, if you make 7 decisions in a row, that means you didn't make 128. So the improbable mirrors would be one of the 128 that was furthest removed from that seventh real decision, kind of thing.
that's exactly. I don't remember who says it, but I think it's Loyal, um, who makes the point, or maybe it's her, and when they get to what is supposed to be that statue of Hawkwing, and it's
A
It's a
Trolloc or
Trolloc.
something. Yeah.
Yeah, and they realize that, oh, this is a world where Hawkwing lost. And so the humanity is no more. And someone makes the point of, well, maybe that's why it's so hazy. Because when they first get there, and it's hazy, and if they try and look into the distance, it kind of gives them vertigo because it's like a video game trying to render the far distance, and so it's not clear, it's fuzzy.
Hmm.
And that's what they comment. Someone makes the point where maybe that's why everything's so fuzzy, is because this is an insubstantial world, because this isn't a very likely possibility.
Which one of the criticisms of the concept in theoretical physics, that there is a dimension for every probability that could ever have occurred ever, is there has to be a saturation point at some point. But if you go with the concept of the further it is from reality, the the less stable it is, you can actually counter that argument with the fact that if it's so unstable it can't exist, that it is not one of these multiverse probabilities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Um, where is it? Okay, so the portal stones connect to the world of dreams somehow, and or the mirror worlds and the world of dreams are somehow connected, and we see that pretty definitively at the end there when Perrin starts to see the bleed over of the different possibilities or the different last battles that are happening in different mirror worlds, which is a confirmation of what we already had seen strongly hinted at with Rand, because Rand was making mirrors, as well as there's some hints previous about seeing possibilities, not just seeing the threads, the pattern as it is going on in his world, but also seeing possibilities. And so in the Dragon Reborn paperback, page 238, uh the title is chapter 21, A World of Dreams. And this is where Egwene goes to Varen and gets the notes, ostensibly about Leandrin, but then Varen talks to her about the world of dreams. That Anaya had been testing her, but the testing had all been about her dreaming. And uh, as Varen says, that is only part of what a dreamer does, child, perhaps the least part. And as we find out, yeah, that actually is the least part. The bigger part is about being able to access the world of dreams. Um, with one finger, Varen drew a number of parallel lines across the area she had cleared, lines clear and dust atop the old beeswax. Let these represent worlds that might exist if different choices had been made, if major turning points in the pattern had gone another way. The worlds reached by the portal stones, Egwene said, to show that she had listened to Varen's lectures on the journey from Toman Head. What could this possibly have to do with whether or not she was a dreamer? Good question. Very good. But the pattern may be even more complex than that, child. The wheel weaves our lives to make the pattern of an age, but the ages themselves are woven into the age lace, the great pattern. Who can know if this is even the 10th part of the weaving, though? Some of the in the Age of Legends apparently believe that there were still other worlds, even harder to reach than the worlds of the portal stones, if that can be believed, lying like this. She drew more lines, cross-hatching the first set,
Which would be like the Elfin and Aelfin.
which is what
Yeah.
I was just
Yeah.
thinking of. They somehow exist. They aren't a mirror world, but they also aren't part of our world. They're something else. Also, in rereading this, I think it's important to reiterate that something interesting about the portal stones is interesting to me is that the portal stones are not from the Age of Legends. They may not even be from the first age. They might be from the first age. They might be from a previous turning, but the portal stones were known to the Age of Legends, and the people in the Age of Legends studied them.
Mm-hmm.
to learn about mirror worlds, and that knowledge is what let them create the Waygates. So anyway, the warp and the woof of the weave. Perhaps the wheel of time weaves a still greater pattern from worlds. I I think so. I think this is Jordan setting up his ending,
Mm-hmm.
because I think that is in a lot of ways what was happening, is that we are seeing what Varen was postulating here, is that, yeah, the wheel of time weaves a still greater pattern from worlds, plural.
Yeah, and when we'll get back to the world of dreams, remember I brought up the idea that the world of dreams is probably a collective consciousness of all the souls that are involved in the real world. And the reason why we can have an essence of these mirror worlds in it is because there's a strength to the higher probability versions of the real world that could exist in this
Well,
area,
that goes right into what Varen
which would
is
explain
explaining.
why the world of dreams, now that I'm thinking about it, was being destroyed faster
Hmm.
than the real world in the end of the book, because there was a 50-50 chance of the Dark One winning at that time, which you have the real world, which is still solid, holding on, but the world of dreams is in this 50-50 spot that, hey, maybe the Dark One's actually winning right now.
And you would have to think that, so at least then 50%, but then possibly more of the mirror worlds are losing or have lost.
Which
And
you
so
got from the visions of people dying, and the images of men dying and Trollocs dying, but it was more men dying than the Trollocs dying in these visions that Perrin was seeing as he was going through.
but to your point about the mirror worlds, this is what Varen says next, which I find interesting, is in all of these worlds, whatever their other variations, a few things are constant. One is that the Dark One is imprisoned in all of them. Uh, I think the use of the word constant there is not an accident,
Hmm.
because Varen isn't using it in the scientific sense, but I suspect Jordan is
Mm.
that it is a constant, just like
Which is why a
9.8
black
meters
hole
per
is
second
where
per
God
second.
divides by zero, right? So,
Yeah. Yeah. Because, gravity, something we know of and still science struggles to explain what it actually is, but we know what it does. 9.8 meters per second per second. That is a
on
constant
Earth.
on Earth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was about to say we have different
Mm-hmm.
calculations for different planets,
Hint,
and it has to do
hint,
with
yep.
mass. Yeah.
Hence again why we know what it does, but it's hard to explain. Um, And all of them, how can that be? Are you saying there is a father of lies in each world? The thought of so many dark ones made her shiver. No, child. There is one creator who exists everywhere at once for all of these worlds. In the same way, there is only one dark one who also exists in all of these worlds at once. If he is freed from the prison the creator made in one world, he is freed on all. So long as he is kept prisoner in one, he remains imprisoned on all. That does not seem to make sense, Egwene protested. Paradox, child. The Dark One is the embodiment of paradox and chaos, the destroyer of reason and logic, the breaker of balance, the unmaker of order. God dividing by zero.
Hmm.
Um, and also to the point of probabilities, is while there are all of these possibilities of mirror worlds where humanity could lose, I think what Jordan is telling us through Varen here is that this is why this is reality and why this world matters. Because I think the Dark One can only break free here. And you kind of see that in the one mirror world we do go to. Or well, actually, even in all the glimpses we get in that section where they fast travel through the portal stone, is
Hmm.
that um because the Trollocs beat Hawkwing, that means Rand isn't born. That means there's just nothing until that mirror world explodes, implodes, disappears, goes on forever for nothing.
Hmm.
Well,
Well, it
and then
gets further and further removed from what reality is.
until it
Yeah.
just evaporates.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Which lets you know how close the battle was because this again going back to why it was happening faster in the dream world. Dream world's connected to all the possibilities, and what it was so close of a battle that one false move, the Dark One wins.
Hmm. Um, or at least humanity loses. And
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think
yeah.
that's what I'm getting at is
Well, I'm
that
saying the Dark One wins because he tore apart reality. That's why the Earth was coming up and entropy was just destroying everything.
that is what in hindsight I find interesting about the I win again, lose Theron voice is that, well, you didn't win. Humanity just lost because if Rand dies, humanity loses, but the Dark One doesn't really win because the Dark One doesn't break free.
Mhm.
That is Rand's point at the end is this is why you tried so hard to corrupt me. Because if you kill me, yeah, humanity doesn't win, but you don't get what you want either.
Hmm.
Um Varen said, "I. What does this have to do with being a dreamer? The Dark One is bound in Shalgul, and I do not want to even think about him escaping. Um, do with being a dreamer? Why nothing, child, except that we must all confront the Dark One in one way or another. He is imprisoned now, but the pattern did not bring Randall Thor into the world for no purpose. The Dragonborn will face the Lord of the Grave, that much is sure. If Rand survives that long, of course. The Dark One will try to distort the pattern if he can. Well, we have gone rather far afield, haven't we? Um, Forgive me, Varen Sedai, but if this has nothing to do with being a dreamer, why are you telling me about it?" Varen stared at her as if she were deliberately being dense. I love Varen. Nothing. Of course it has something to do with it, child. You just said it had nothing to do with, but this is why she's so great. The point is that there is a third constant besides the creator and the Dark One. And this is where we finally get to the real point here, because I think this is a big effing deal again, because she's using constant in a colloquial sense, but I think Jordan is using it in a scientific sense,
Hmm.
which means the creator, the Dark One, and the world of dreams are all pretty equally powerful and important
Hmm.
to how the world works, to how the universe works in his
Well,
establishment.
just like in
That
real
makes
life,
sense.
we have light, polarity, and matter. Three constants
Hmm.
that we have to deal with that make us us and everything. So we have light, polarity, and matter. It's just
Interesting way of looking at it. It's interesting analogy for these concepts as well.
well, I should say energy instead of light, but
Okay,
we
but
see it as light. Yeah.
yes. So I find the her explanation, her description of what this constant is, I find really interesting here. There is a world that lies within each of these others, inside all of them at the same times, or perhaps surrounding them. Writers in the Age of Legends called it Teleron Riyadh, the unseen world. Perhaps the world of dreams is a better translation. Many people, ordinary folk who could not think of channeling, sometimes glimpse Teleron Riyadh in their dreams and even catch glimmers of these other worlds through it. Think of some of the peculiar things you have seen in your dreams. But a dreamer child, a true dreamer, can enter Teleron Riyadh. Blah 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 blah. Okay, so uh, and that's kind of the end of the explanation there of what that is. So then, what does this mean?
Sorry for the hiccup bathroom break, but yeah, when we this is where we get back to the soul and what consciousness is because if we have this place where this, as I brought up earlier in the conversation today, that the soul is actually a physical thing. It's just not physical in the way that we feel it in the world, right? It's physical, but it has a physical quality. That's why in that space, Rand could see the threads. It's why the Dark One himself could implant it into another body and it actually have some sort of essence that brings that body back to life because the body had to die for that to happen. If that is the case, then all the probabilities of that physical thing would exist as well. And as we said before, it can weaken as it gets further from reality. But uh, but when we have a place where everybody's consciousness comes together, everybody's probabilities also come together. And that would be an interesting concept. Now, what we do know about dreams in real life is that they have two major purposes to the best of our knowledge at this point. One is to simulate life and basically uh, give you heuristics to go by when, especially with social interactions. It seems to be really relevant about around social interactions. So give you these replayed simulations that you can't remember. So when you're in the real situation, you react in a proper way based on all these simulations. So you basically gone through it's the old Doctor Strange. I went through blah, 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 this many probable realities and we won once. Your brain does that every night based on previous experience. And the other one is to explore uh fear, basically. That's why you one of the things that makes dreams so weird is you're completely emotional in nature with uh no prefrontal cortex interaction. So your brain is playing out emotion to to store that away. It's storing memories, it's going through simulations, it's it's solidifying what you did in the past into memory. One of the phenomenon about memory, I know I'm meandering a little bit, but now I'm getting back on track. Uh, One of the interesting phenomenon about memory is if you track your dreams, if you have a dream journal or whatever, and you're an old man like me and you wake up 3 times to pee, so you have multiple dreams as they go along, and you can see this, is you'll notice the earlier in the night dreams are more relevant to what's happening now,
Mhm.
and the later in the night dreams actually have more things from your past further back. So it's actually connecting past events to current events to make sense of the world so you can navigate better. And it's an interesting phenomenon. Uh, I don't know what Jordan was going for in connecting that, but yeah,
Well, here's a thought that kind of connects to the idea of souls, so we can get more into it next time. Is so one of the interesting thoughts about the mirror worlds and how they work tangibly is, again, the soul is a physical thing. And okay, well, and I feel like this has been asked before, and I'll have to go look for it now when I'm getting ready for next week. Is so all of those lives Rand experienced going through the mirror worlds, going through the portal stone, were those his soul, a reflection of his soul, or were those different souls?
or different turnings of the age, or
Or are the mirror worlds, because the way Varen describes it, and keep in mind, one of the tricky author tricks here is that Jordan can always say, well, she's an unreliable narrator, which is true, because she doesn't know. She's guessing off of very incomplete data. I mean, by her own admission, there's very incomplete data. So we're not sure how accurate what Varen is saying is true here. And she describes the world of dreams as a world that lives within each of these others, inside all of them at the same time, or perhaps surrounding them. I would add, or maybe and or,
well,
because it could be, to her point about paradoxes, it could be a paradox. It could be within and surrounding at the same time. And it makes me wonder then, so are the mirror worlds created via the world of dreams? The reflections of people dreaming about possibilities.
and that's where the consolidation of memories comes in, because let's bring the heroes of the horn into this.
Hmm.
So they're born out into the real world as their souls, but then they go back to the world of dreams when the real world them dies again. But they always are a representation of that person that they were before in many different ways. We get Birgitti's, she was basically female Robin Hood at one
Hmm.
point, and all these things. And they always have the same tendencies. So back to the concept that I was talking about earlier, where our brains consolidate memories that are similar together to create the you that you are, and you have certain strengths and weaknesses based on all of that. Well, they always remember everything when they're in the world of dreams, but then when they're
Hmm.
in real world, all of the consolidated memories are there, but they're under the surface. So they're in the real world with these consolidated memories, and they always end up with the same pattern because they're still the same person as they go. And the same thing with Rand. He was Lews Therin before he was Lews Therin. Lews Therin just creepily came in with this byproduct of the taint, which maybe the taint that drives you crazy is the Dark One's ability to access the actual soul. Because remember, he's the Lord of the Dead. He
Hmm.
can't access future souls. He can access the essence of the soul that was there before and drive you crazy with it.
That's a good point and an interesting thought.
Yeah, and so
Um,
all of these consolidated memories make Brigitte, the new Brigitte, whoever it is, Guidel Kane, whatever, Arthur Hawkwing. We don't get to see when Arthur Hawkwing is reborn and reborn and reborn and reborn. That, I mean, that would actually be a cool side story, a reborn Arthur Hawkwing, right? So, but it creates the person that exists that is similar to what always exists, and then they go back and they remember it because in the world of dreams they have access to all the memory. They have access to all the consciousness of every life they've ever had.
Something I found interesting, an interesting thought, go rereading through here, and then you talking about dreams, both what we know about it in reality, and then
Mhm.
what we know or think we know about it in the Wheel of Time, is there is this train of thought that there is a an unseen world. Um, this manifests in Christian theology with the idea of spiritual warfare, and demonic influence and angelic influence, etc., and whatnot. But there's also this train of thought that this unseen realm can be accessed with psychedelic drugs. That's what psychedelic drugs are doing, is they are turning on a part of your brain that otherwise is switched off, because if you were seeing the unseen world, you would go crazy.
This is going to sound odd, but stick with me here. Psychedelic drugs, I think, actually just bring us back to infancy.
Hmm.
Look at the way a baby looks when they're developing vision and all of this. They just kind of at the entire world because their eyes are open for the first time to the real world. And what we see, if you're actually watching this, you see an ugly guy on your left and you see a slightly less ugly guy on your right.
Which
Uh,
am I?
yeah,
Anyway.
yeah, you're on the left side of my screen, but it's but those are just wavelengths. Those are just wavelengths with off an object that is actually mostly space.
Boy, that's, man, now you're sending us down a rabbit hole, because again, wavelengths, what is that? Well, that's physics.
Hmm.
And what is Jordan, and how does he craft the worlds he creates? Is he takes concepts of physics and then says, and then has a thought experiment with them, basically.
Yeah, and we're basically products of wavelengths of light and wavelengths of I'm going to use the term magnetism, but I know a real physicist is going to correct me on that. But that I like to bring the concept to real world understanding.
Hmm.
So we're just wavelengths of magnetism and wavelengths of light. That's all everything is, with the matter in between, which the matter is actually quite small. Every human on the planet, if you took the actual matter in their body and squished it into one thing, is the size of a baseball. So that's not small. Of course, it would be as heavy as every human on the planet, but it would be the size of a baseball. That's how much space we are. But we see solid objects because of the way our eyes translate that. Babies don't have that yet. The first time they open their eyes, their brain is trying to make sense of wavelengths. And I think when we take psychedelics, we shut off that portion of our brain to some degree. It can't be all the way, or else we would our heads would explode probably. But shut off somewhat, or at least dull that portion of our brain that made that translation and created that heuristic. So now we can actually see matter more closely to the way it is, which is pretty trippy, which is why they call it a trip. But I mean, I don't know if that's beneficial to us or not. I'm curious. I might do it one of these days. It's not that easy to do in the US unless you've got really good ties like Joe Rogan or some of these people.
Yeah.
Uh, but
Well,
yeah,
I can confirm a trip is definitely a trip, and I take what is not one of the softer psychedelics, which is ketamine, and it's
mhm.
not even full ketamine. It is a derivative of ketamine that is a prescription drug uh, uh, for drug resistant depression. And the first time you take it, it is weird. It is what is going on here. In
Well, yeah, this is a good place to kind of close out for the day because we can go back to Rand in The Dark One's Nothingness here because of the way he described it. So
mm-hmm.
when you're about to die, your brain releases a bunch of DMT, and this is the it's really hard to study because you have to kill people to do this, but and bring them back to life. But
If you want to, I think I've referenced it before. I'll say it again. If you want a good, concise exploration of this concept, go to the Y Files
mhm.
and find their episode on near death experiences. I think it's about 45 minutes long, and they go into the few studies that have actually been done on this. And there aren't many, to your point, because it's hard to study, but there are a few, and they're interesting.
Yeah, well, DMT, for those that aren't familiar, is a very powerful psychedelic. And so I actually wonder, this is a study we probably could do under the proper uh, pr oversight, is babies that are freshly born, what's the DMT levels in their brains?
Hmm,
Because
hmm.
the psychedelic actually is released in your brain at the last minute, right before you die, and it's the hypothesis that this is the feeling of what this is where near death experiences come from, because you're actually finally seeing the world as it really is right before you go. Now back to Rand, when he was describing where he was, he said, "This is not exactly correct, but this is the vision I put on it
It's the way
because
his
of
brain chose to interpret it.
this
Yeah.
is the way my brain chose to interpret it," which is why we probably get religious connotations to a lot of near death experiences because most people are religious. So, and you're seeing something that you can't comprehend because your brain has already created a heuristic of solid desk right here, microphone right here, the sounds I'm hearing, their language, all of these things that we've consolidated over time. And then all of a sudden you're hit with this psychedelic at the last minute, possible last minute, that causes you to see vibrations and wavelengths, and your brain can't make sense of it because that part is dulled or shut off. You're going to you're going to revert to your belief system to make sense of it. And I think that's why people have so many different experiences in this, but there are similarities because we have a connection through social belief systems. And Rand described it best. This is the picture I put on it because this is what I know. But it's something completely different.
uh, or as someone on my side of the fence might say, it's that no,
It's the
that
way it
is
was designed to be.
that it
Yeah.
or well,
Yeah.
that is reality. You're just able to see it now. That is
Hmm.
real. It's just we usually can't see it. But in agreement to your point, because your brain can't make sense of it.
Hmm.
That is so. My last point, because I find this an interesting connection here, and it's one of the zillions of man. I wish James Rigney was still alive to ask these kinds of questions, because I would love to get his take on this. Is Have you watched the second season of Ancient Apocalypse?
I have not.
Okay. So they touch on this there. But there's this train of thought. There's a channel I watch sometimes, a guy named Luke Caverns, who's from San Antonio, I think. and he's I can't remember if he's an archaeologist or an anthropologist, and he studies primarily Central American uh, cultures, ancient, prehistoric, uh, Central American stuff, and uh, he talks about, and there's I don't know how old this train of thought is, but there's this idea that there are pyramids all over the world. And to me, I've always just thought, well, yeah, because it's a very basic shape that if you want to build something really big and tall, you make it a pyramid. Just structurally, just makes
Hmm.
sense. But there's a train of thought that says, well, because there are all of these similar structures, there must have been a connection with these cultures. And that's something that I just brain farted on his name. What's the ancient apocalypse guys? Hancock. Graham
Yeah.
Hancock talks about is there are all these similarities between cultures. Maybe there's a connection there. Something Luke Caverns talks about, and I know this is an original idea and he said as much, so I don't know how old the idea is that, well, wait a minute, here's another possibility. Most, if not all, of these ancient cultures took some kind of psychedelic,
Hmm.
especially the Central and South American ones. We know what they
Yeah.
took because we still have it around. There are still shamans today, in
Ayahuasca.
Central and South America that make this stuff. So there's this thought of, well, if they're all taking psychedelics, then maybe they're all seeing the same thing.
Which, and we are under an umbrella of a similar physics all across the world. So when we talk about design of things that can that we find having function, but also function to such a degree we call it spiritual. There's
Yeah.
going to be similarities there because
I would love to be able to ask Robert Jordan what he thinks about that idea, and if as an analog to the Wheel of Time world, so then if you take DMT or you go on a ayahuasca trip or whatever, are you seeing the world of dreams? Is that what you're seeing? Is that what you're interacting with? Are you seeing the mirror worlds or both? Can you access the mirror worlds through the world of dreams? Presumably
Mhm.
you would be able to somehow, because as Varen says, that it's a constant. It is a connection to all of these other things.
Well, and if we go into the realm of quantum physics, everything is connected. So are we seeing the quantum realm
Mm,
in its reality when we go to the world of dreams? Which we don't know. I'm gonna have to look up DMT studies now on what parts of the brain lights up and what parts of the brain shut down, because I know there's studies on those.
mhm,
Because if it's something like, for instance, our ventromedial prefrontal cortex shutting down at that point, then we're almost again like babies. The part of our memory that is making sense of the world goes away when you're doing that, and you're seeing things as they really are without your own brain saying, no, that's a book, that's blue, that's red. So it's yeah, it'd be an interesting thing that there has to be part of that still active, which the more we're learning about memory, the more interesting it gets, because everybody used to think up until about 5 minutes ago, the hippocampus was the storage center, like a database for
mm,
all of your memories. But what we found in the last couple of years is no, it's actually a hub.
hmm,
The hippocampus sends these signals to all sorts of other places in your brain. And this is actually helping a lot with PTSD research, because apparently there's a glitch in your hippocampus when you are traumatized to the point where you have PTSD, that keeps sending it to the emotional center of your brain and similar things to the emotional center of your brain, and will not let you eliminate memory, which elimination is for the technical word for being exposed to something similar but realizing it's not dangerous. So a good example is someone who was mortared in a war and maybe suffered an injury or saw their mates die or whatever, and they come home and someone shuts a trunk which makes a similar sound, they go bolting out and hiding behind a bush because their brain can't distinguish the difference between the two. And elimination would be exposing somebody to the trunk being shut and nothing happening. And that requires that allocation of your memory to go to a logic center of your brain. And apparently there's something wrong where it goes to the hippocampus and gets rerouted, and goes to the hippocampus and it's mortar, it's mortar, and it never, and it not never, but at this point we're having trouble making it go away. And so the hippocampus actually sends memories to all parts of your brain, even the limbic system, even the cerebellum, which is just muscle twitches and stuff. So we're learning so much in that area, and it's so new that
And yet, like a lot of things we've talked about, it's interesting that Jordan, one of his gifts as a person and then as a writer, his ability to translate this to the page is he seemed to have this intuitive grasp of things that he maybe didn't intellectually know. And
Mhm.
yet it translates onto the page, and then you can come back later with newer ideas in psychology or neurology or whatever and go, well, actually no, that makes a lot of sense because.
Yeah, and to close out, because I do have a timeline here, because I have to finalize this final, and
Have
I have a
fun.
lot of work tonight, so I have to do it now. But and I'm gonna have to consolidate two videos, because if you saw a glitch earlier, we had a random shutdown of this computer. I guess it's time to get a new computer, but the which I can't afford because the damn tires of my truck need to be replaced too. But the no, but back into the serious thing, I actually want to. I think I found my thesis advisor in my cognitive professor this year, who I'm taking next semester again for statistics, because I heard she's the best at that too. Is one of the things she said, which I think I brought up in the last episode, is the closer you get to a PhD, the more specialized you become. You basically become more specialized until you get a degree. I actually want to talk to her to challenge that if we can somehow do an integrated science PhD where it's not I'm narrowing down one thing to study this one thing and be the best at this one thing. You can get a PhD by integrating everybody else's work into one thing. And that would actually be something I think the world needs.
Mhm.
And it would be a good pilot, at least. I'll sacrifice myself to science. Let me try to be the first, and if I fail, whatever, right? I'm still gonna be in this nice house with air conditioning and my three dogs. Well, they'll pass away at some point, but I'm willing to try, and it just yeah. But that's what I think we're this integration is going to help us make more sense of these things, because we're talking, as we talked Wheel of Time, physics, psychology, physiology, uh you name, but politics, history, all of these things came together, and it made for a really interesting ride. So
Mhm. Mhm. Well, hopefully y'all continue to be interested here because we still have, I mean, we could go on forever with this, and I mean, hell, we might, depending on how many tangents we end up going down until the frickin' season three. Why hasn't it been canceled yet? It's
as soon
awful.
as
But
as soon as I submit this final, I have all of that time, that reading time and everything. I'm going to go ahead and finish User Illusion. I'm going to make it a point to do that. We talked about fiction. Uh, we can discuss more on that. I'm going to dive back into. I think it's going to go ahead. I think it's going to go great with just finishing Wheel of Time and doing the consciousness research. With getting back H.P. Lovecraft again. That'll be fun. I might. It's not that much. It's a book that this thick, so I'll probably try to tear through that in this time off too. So that'll be fun.
well, next time we will talk souls and what does that mean, and maybe that will get us to an answer because I'm trying to find an answer or the answer myself rather than just going and looking and seeing, has Sanderson actually answered the question yet of how the heck did Rand switch bodies? What the heck happened there? I'm trying to find an answer or the hopefully the answer before I go looking for the answer. So maybe next week we'll end up there.
So are we going to talk? Are we going to make it a kind of combined episode? Not social, not political, none of that, but like talking about souls in a religious,
Yeah. Well,
what we
I don't
know
think there's any
concept.
way not to,
Yeah,
because there is definitely a Judeo-Christian strand to the Wheel of
yeah,
Time. Yeah, he brings
but to
in Eastern
Isomorphic's
philosophy and
point,
all things.
Eastern philosophy on reincarnation and what that
Hmm.
means and
Hmm.
finding enlightenment is a huge thing. And yeah, that would we will have to explore that further. Did Rand finally find enlightenment? Because enlightenment would be the end. My argument to say no and go ahead and put your comment here, isomorphic, to further this conversation, is no, because he's still alive.
Hmm.
Because that's the point in Buddhist philosophy is when you've reached enlightenment, it's done. There's no more, right? So you've reached the highest form. You're no longer of this earth.
Yeah, there's a thought, and I can bring in some references to one of my favorite franchises that I mentioned last time. Stargate has some interesting storylines along that line. So we'll see how far we keep going with this. We'll see how far we get next time in it and how many more tangents we get to. But next time we'll talk souls. We'll see if we can figure out what happened with Rands. And then we'll see what else there is left to talk about based on what you guys think. Scott, where the heck are you? What are your thoughts on the ending?
Yeah. Or is enlightenment just when the aliens think you're worthy?
Sure, that's probably it.
And then they take you to the hollow earth.
Is that did they leave your butt alone after that?
Well, that's how they
Or did
figure
they
it
give
out.
you or did they give you more butt stuff? I guess it depends on what you're
Oh,
into.
hit that prostate
And on that note, we'll see y'all next time.
later.